If you were around the epic gaming space around 10 years ago, which I'm assuming you were, you probably know The Walking Dead game. At that time, the whole franchise was pretty much at its peak popularity. Whether it's the game, the TV show, or even the comic books. Although with time its popularity would sizzle out. Most people don't look at The Walking Dead TV show very fondly, saying it went downhill around the time of season 7. The comic book, while definitely having some major problems, is remembered rather fondly, but it has a very limited fan base. Basically only the die-hard fans ever read the comic books, let alone finished it to the very end. One medium that everyone always loved, and I think everyone still loves to this day, is the games. Whatever your opinion about the games is or was, I think if you played it and you finished it all the way through, there was probably at least something in each season that you found very charming or very enjoyable. For example, me, I thought the last season was easily the worst. I could not really care less for any of the characters except for Clementine and AJ. But because of AJ and Clementine, I found enjoyment in the last season. All things considered, it feels like a nice full circle from season 1 to season 4, with the AJ and Clementine relationship being a mirror to Clementine and Lee relationship. That being said, from the technical and gameplay perspective, those games were kinda lying to you. I'm pretty sure you heard enough or you figured it out yourself about how each season basically had to retcon or restart the previous season, because if it didn't, the developers would have to make several different games about each individual decision that you made in the previous one. Most infamous example would be, no matter where you ended up in season 2, whether if it's with Kenny, Jane, or Wellington, season 3 would absolutely shit all over your decision, just drown it in feces. Kenny would die, Jane would die, the Wellington would fall, you would just basically be rendered to end up alone, no matter what. I do believe the only real difference between all of the scenarios is that if you went alone at the end of season 2, Clementine would be missing a finger in season 3, which, this being the only difference, is pretty laughable. So I'm not going to focus on that, but rather focus on how each individual season forces you to like or dislike certain characters. Starting of course with season 1. Now to be honest, in season 1 there aren't really that many instances where the game tries to push you towards a character or against the character. The main conflict within the group being obviously between Kenny and Lilly. Now, if you played the games and you finished them all the way through, chances are you probably really love Kenny. He's one of your favorite characters. And I'm only making this assumption because that's usually what the discourse around this game is. Kenny is everyone's favorite. And I wouldn't even blame you if that's the case. Kenny, from the first episode, proves his loyalty when he saves Lee when Larry punches him. So right from the get-go you are inclined to like Kenny. It is however what comes after what kinda proves that Kenny was kind of an asshole actually. The way I see the conflict between Kenny and Lilly is a conflict of logic and loyalty. Kenny demands you being loyal all the time, but he does not really care about the well-being of the entire group. The only thing he really cares about is his family, which you know is fair, but at the same time he feels entitled for the entire group to feel the same. In other words, if you disagree with him once, get ready to hear about it for the remainder of the entire season. Friendship with Kenny is actually very toxic. If you, as the player, as Lee, are not willing to give your life at any instance, at all times, for his family or him, you are basically the devil for him. Or if you or anyone else makes a mistake in the group, like Ben for example, again you are going to hear it for the remainder of your lives. I mean, sure, Ben fucked up monumentally, which got Kenny's son killed, but Kenny literally did the same in the beginning of season 1 with Herschel. I mean, he does end up sacrificing himself for Ben if you saved Ben earlier, so I guess bonus points for Kenny, but this doesn't really change anything. There are many other instances of Kenny being a hypocrite, or just acting like an entitled little bitch. One such instance of Kenny's entitlement and toxic personality being when Lee gets bit. Few throughout the game found yourself agreeing more with Lilly than Kenny. Basically what Kenny tells you when you are about to go looking for Clementine.
Lee, man, you know I care about Clementine, and I am a Christian man. And I keep asking myself, if this was me, asking you for help, asking you to put your life on the line, would you be there for me? Because there have been plenty of times when you ain't been.
And what the fuck is he even talking about? Because even if you're not agreeing with him all the time, the game does not ever even give you the option to not be there for Kenny or his family. On top of that, this isn't even as much about Lee, as he's pretty much dead as far as they know. This is about Clementine. So this motherfucker would not go to look for a lost, a kidnapped little girl because of some childish beef with Lee. Because he felt entitled to be agreed with for the rest of eternity. Moreover, what's even worse, if you do not agree with him killing Larry in the freezer, which I'm going to get to later, he would have quite literally left you to die in the beginning of episode 3. That is just because you do not agree with him to smash a man's head in, who might still be alive, in front of his daughter, which he decides to do anyway. But I don't know, man, you kinda weren't there for me when I needed you. Fuck this guy. And it's not to say that Kenny is wrong in every instance ever, but even when you agree with him on some things, he doesn't fucking care. Takes one siding with Lilly for him to fucking hate your guts for the rest of his life. Let's take a look at Lilly. Now Lilly is a special character in the way that the Telltale made some of the worst decisions ever with her. First of all, there is this little character in the comic book series, and mainly in the book series, called Lily Call. She appears only briefly in the comic books, but she is the main protagonist in the novels. And long story short, it's the same character. Except it's actually not. The thing is, the original idea for Lily from the games was to be the Lily from the comic books, the one that kills Rick's wife Lori and the one that ends up killing the governor. And we know this is true because in-game achievement after Lily leaves the group used to be Woodbury, which is the name of the governor's little town. The main reason why I think making a comic adjacent character one of the main characters in this game is that it obviously limits the character in a monumental way. Lily had to survive and leave the group eventually, but because she was such an important character, that was not an easy task to do. I mean, by the time episode 3 rolls around, she is basically established as the leader of the group. And again, the main sort of conflict for you as the player is between Lily and Kenny. So for her to do such a 180 in episode 3, it just seems weird. I mean, she handled the death of her father pretty well, all things considered. She kept leading the group, and despite them not doing terribly well, it could hardly be considered her fault. And like, despite everything that happened between them, Lily was obviously the more level-headed between her and Kenny. She still valued his opinion and did her best to keep the entire group safe. That includes him and his family. And that's despite him killing her father and arguing to leave her behind when the bandits attacked. And to add insult to the injury, even if you are siding with Lily throughout basically the entire game, she still rats you out. That she still reveals that Lee was a murderer before, which feels like such a betrayal to players who actually supported Lily, just for the sake of drama and just because this character eventually needs to leave the group. So now you as a player are caught between someone who is fated to leave your group because they are not from this game originally, and someone who is an absolute selfish moron. And on top of that, Lily being portrayed as this controlling freak as she is in episode 3 is kind of out of the character, because she was not like that in the first 2 episodes. In fact, she was one of the most level-headed people in the group. Some of the main things she argues for are to, for example, take the food and leave the St. John's farm, as she knows something is wrong, but she doesn't want to get involved with it to protect the group, which, you know, I think it's a fair argument at the end of the day. That was before they knew they were actually cannibals. Then she argues to not smash her father's head in, which, you know, again is pretty understandable, all things considered. I mean, it's easy to argue against her and say that Larry was gonna turn, which compared to Kenny's attitude when Doug got bit, they still let him into the RV. And they knew for sure he was gonna die and turn. There was no if he can survive, there was no surviving for him. And then Lily, as opposed to Kenny, also wanted to stay at the motel, which I actually agreed with Kenny, because the motel did not do them any good. But again, that is just a thing of opinion. What I'm saying is Lily killing either Doug or Carly. If you actually saved Doug, she would want to kick Ben out. And Ben was the traitor. And don't forget, according to their knowledge, they still had the traitor with them, and they didn't know why they betrayed them. For all they knew, the traitor could have still been connected to the bandits and maybe have them track the group. So having no option to actually discuss with Lily or anything after it happens is the game's way of making you dislike this character. The game actually does give you the option to tell her that you're going to leave with her, but guess what happens?
Come back here, you crazy bitch!
She fucking bolts anyway without you. Trying to connect this character to the comic books was such a bad idea from the beginning, and should have not been the idea that the developers came up with, and instead the conflict should have been handled in a different way altogether. Something like Jane and Kenny in season 2. And speaking of season 2, I am going to get back to Lily in season 4. But now let's move to season 2. In season 2, Kenny is a bit more bearable. In that here, he does not really leave you for dead when you disagree with him, which is an improvement. I mean, he still gets pissed at you when you do not agree with him, and he even gets very angry at this 11-year-old girl when his girlfriend dies. But all in all, I think the main conflict now between Kenny and Jane is handled better than the conflict in season 1. At least here they both make convincing points. Kenny represents fierce loyalty, even though he's very unstable and emotional, while Jane is a survivor through and through, but she's unreliable and avoidant. I'd still argue this conflict could have been made better if you knew Jane a bit longer, because now you're basically choosing between someone who you knew for a couple of days and someone who was there from the beginning, essentially. But from another perspective, the game could be asking you if you value the old days and close your eyes in front of the obvious danger that Kenny represents, and if you're willing to move on from him.
That's one way of looking at it.
Something I find funny and weird in season 2 Kenny is how he speaks about Lee. For example, in the last episode of season 2, he says that he wishes Lee was there. And this happens regardless if you agreed with Lily or him throughout the season 1. And this line is, well, first of all, it's a fan service, obviously, but at the same time it feels like a strange way of trying to romanticize the relationship between Kenny and Lee and trying to portray them like best friends, even though when they were quite obviously not.
Would you be there for me? Because there have been plenty of times when you ain't been.
That is, if you agreed with Lily once in season 1. It almost feels like Telltale, because they saw how popular Kenny is, not only brought him back for season 2, but also tried to act like he was not a toxic person in season 1. And he's still toxic in some instances in season 2, but far less than in season 1. If the attempt from Telltale was to tell the story of how the right choice is to let Kenny go, which Telltale does a lot in its games when they choose to basically push the player to make a certain decision, or they outright do not give you a decision at all, in favor of the story that they want to tell and the message that they want to give, regardless if the game acts like you actually have a choice. I think they did a shitty job in that. And again, that's not to say that Jane is perfect, but she is still far better option than Kenny, if you're looking at it from a purely logical standpoint, because realistically, if you picked Kenny and stayed with him, you would not make it far. The conflict of Kenny and Jane is a topic for another day. The point I'm trying to make now is that season 2 goes lengths to humanize Kenny and to basically retcon his stranded relationship with Lee, if you had one, in order to make you sympathize with Kenny more throughout season 2. And you might think that this is negligible, that this is in favor of the story, but in that case, what Telltale is basically doing is telling anyone who sided with Lilly, fuck you, you were wrong, Kenny was right throughout the entire season 1, which is a pretty dangerous message. Which brings me to Lily's appearance in season 4. Now obviously season 4 is the final season, so understandably for its final season, Telltale wanted to sort of bring The Walking Dead full circle back to its roots, with featuring character from season 1. And you know what, that's all fine. And Lily is an obvious pick for this, because she was a main character in season 1, she was part of the main group, and even though she did not really interact with Clementine that much, they still obviously had some connection. But when she returns in season 4, any nuance that she had in season 1 is stripped away. I mean, sure, she has the option to be nice at first to Clementine. This is pretty much nothing more than manipulation. It is in the same way Carver was nice to Clementine. And on top of that, the entire plot of season 4 has Lily basically beefing with children. Nothing that you did in season 1 matters anymore, as Lily is the villain of the final season, and you have no saying in that. And as villains in the Telltale's The Walking Dead are, she is very one-dimensional in this season. There are no redeeming qualities about Lily. In that regard, the final season is my least favorite season, because I give absolutely zero shit about anyone this season except for Clementine and AJ, and I wanted to care about Lily, but I just cannot, because she is not a character, she is a shell, she's an empty shell of what she used to be in season 1. And she wasn't incredibly deep in season 1 either, but she was at least something. And you might argue that the groundwork for her being a villain was built in season 1 when she killed either Doug or Carly. But this argument doesn't really fly, because again, this only happened just so she can be the character from the comic books. The way Lily was written in season 1 would never allow her to just leave. She was the leader of the group, so she sort of had to be kicked out. She had to do something terrible so that she can no longer be a part of this group. And obviously her killing a member of the group is not justifiable, but for the game to strip away all the context of the murder and what happened before in order to vilify Lily and to justify Kenny's toxic personality is rather disingenuous and goes against everything that the game tried to be in the beginning. Anyway, I think that's it for today. There are many instances in these games where you are basically pushed to like certain characters and dislike certain other characters, but I felt like talking about Lily especially because I recently replayed the games and I found Lily to be strangely, I don't know, agreeable in season 1. I think the hate is unjustified, and I think Telltale was clearly picking favorites when making the sequels. Anyway, like if you enjoyed and leave a comment if you disagreed, and I will ignore any comment that does disagree with me. And hopefully I will see you next time.